already ranted about the two quarterback system. What did you think after seeing it in the dress rehearsal?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get into with the two quarterback system. It certainly was not my favorite thing. I think before the draft, you and I would have conversations because every Monday you would give me a new theory on what they should do with the draft, draft Kyle Pitts, do this, do that, all of that. And the one thing I've been very consistent about throughout this process is whoever's drafted at three, whether it was Fields, whether it was Lance, I did not want to see them used in this Taysom Hill role.
Yeah.
To me, if you want that element, you want to add the quarterback in the run game, all of those things. If you're talking from a total schematic perspective, let's forget development, all of that. Just that angle, you can get an athlete to play quarterback in the fifth round, in the
Thank you.
sixth round. I mean,
Jamie Newman.
Lamar, right? Jamie Newman would fit that mold. I
Yeah.
mean, Lamar Jackson's backup, the guy from Penn State, Trace
McSorley.
McSorley, he would
Perfect.
be that type of guy. I
Yep.
mean, Michael Robinson, all those years ago from Penn State, if you remember, he was a college quarterback. They made him a fullback, but he could be a Taysom Hill
Kellen
type. I mean,
Mond.
Tim Tebow, Kellen Mond, maybe you develop as a quarterback, but
Yeah.
sure, that type of aspect. So
Yeah.
I was never a fan of trading that much up to go to number three to get one of these supremely gifted quarterbacks who are quarterbacks first, and then throw him in as a part of your run game to match with your starter. I mean, one of the examples I constantly kept throwing throughout the draft process was Baltimore tried it. Baltimore tried it for about 8 games. Joe Flacco was not a fan of it. Lamar Jackson, it looked stupid. And then finally, they pulled the plug. They said, we're not that good as we're a 500 football team. Let's just put Lamar Jackson in the game. And Lamar Jackson, who was raw as a rookie, right? He's refined and grown a lot the last 2 years, but he was a raw rookie, even though he had a lot of college pass attempts and experience in a pro style system. And he immediately walked in with that number one defense and went 6-2 and carried them to the playoffs. And he did it on the back of his running and playmaking ability. So going back
Not
to
his
that,
pocket
these
passing.
guys,
Yes.
right. These guys are so gifted and all of that. I don't want to see this two quarterback system. And frankly, I go back to the old John Madden adage, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And
Thank you.
I personally subscribe to that. I don't get it. I know a lot of people were a fan of how it looked versus the Raiders. Now let's pump the brakes a little bit. The 49ers were clearly prepared and had practiced some element of this switching and swapping, and the Raiders are playing their second and third string defense, and they have no clue what's going to happen. So I think we should pump the brakes based on how it looked against the Raiders. Sure, could this be revolutionary? Could this be something special? Could this be the new wave in the NFL? Definitely possible. I just don't see the point of doing it with a $26 million quarterback and a quarterback that you invested 2 first-round picks and swapped another one and gave a third-round pick to go draft. See, the Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, when Jameis Winston is very cheap, and Taysom Hill, even though he's not cheap, he's not cheap, but they've kind of used his contract to manipulate their cap logistics, and he's not the investment that they have, say, in a guy like a Trey Lance in terms of draft capital. That makes more sense to go with two cheaper quarterbacks and try something like this. I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah. I think the Niners have done a poor job of explaining why they're doing this. Like, if they had said this on draft night, like, our plan is we're going to play both quarterbacks, people would have been like, what? What are you talking about? They weren't talking like this until maybe 3 weeks ago. This just seemed like a new plan. And Kyle hasn't really said why, other than I asked Mike McDaniel, and he basically said, we have two starting quarterbacks. See, I think I disagree with that. I feel like when you do this, you have no starting quarterbacks. And I feel like they feel they have no quarterback. It's not what I think. They don't think Jimmy's a starting quarterback. That's why they traded up to number 3.
Yeah.
I mean, they told us they don't think he's a starter. And they don't think Trey's a starting quarterback right now because he's not starting. So what they're saying is, it's the best we can do right now. We have to do this. And maybe it is the best they can do right now. But I guess if we had known this in April, we'd been like, oh no. Oh no. So maybe it could work out, as you said. It could be revolutionary. It could be really great. But this is never the plan.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, anybody who tells you, oh, it was
It's
Lance
a
and
good
Garoppolo
problem
the
to
whole
have.
way, if they told you that and they said, I mean, I heard someone say that nobody understood the nuances of football and this was going to be Lance and Garoppolo the whole way. I mean, are you kidding me? Do you understand the nuances of football? What team trades up
Right.
that many assets to go draft a quarterback in the top 5 to run a two quarterback system? Honestly, honestly, honest to God, Grant, and I respect all of you guys as reporters and stuff. If you knew this in April, it would be your job to just rip into Kyle Shanahan.
Of course. And if this were going on another team, Niner fans would look at them and be like, look at that team. It's ridiculous what's happening over here. But it's their team and it's Kyle Shanahan, and you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He puts a lot of thought into his stuff. But I think, again, what's happening here is it always goes back to the offseason reports of that Kyle getting here late and sort of having to be talked into Trey Lance. And that day that, a few days before the draft, he came out, looked upset. It seemed like that was the day they made their decision, and he kept saying he needed a starting quarterback. Well, what he's saying is Jimmy isn't one, and right now Trey isn't one yet. So, I don't know.
There's aspects of it. I've only been able to see, to my eyes, 20 snaps of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
The Chargers game
That's
was wildly erratic. The Chiefs game was 3 throws. He looked solid, and I thought more or less he looked good yesterday.
Yes, he
looked fine. The run for the touchdown was nice. He showed some great toughness, and then the throw to Trent Sherfield, while it was still high over the middle of the field, which he has a propensity to do, it was a gutsy throw in a closing pocket. It was a really nice play, and it highlighted his quick release and his ability on third down, where he stands in the pocket and he's willing to make throws. So 100%, but at the same time, I don't think this is a situation where they look at Trey Lance and say we're 100% ready to just give him the job, because there's been a lot of inconsistencies with Trey Lance, whether it's been his accuracy, his post-snap recognition, his just decision-making overall, his decisiveness, and all of that. So I think that's why they've held off naming the starter. But I also think there's a reason, it's not
no one's taking the job.
It's not just injuries. If they felt comfortable with how Garoppolo was playing, given how Lance has looked in this preseason, then they would just name Garoppolo the starter for now.
Yep.
Why haven't they named a starter?
So to me, this is making the best of a not a bad situation, but a non-ideal situation, a situation they didn't want, making the best of it. And I think they would really like Trey Lance to just take this eventually. They're giving him playing time because they want him to be their quarterback. That's why they traded up for him. But then again, if they play him like Taysom Hill, what can he really do to take the job? How long is this going to go?
To me, that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
What would his development track be? Because that's a question I personally cannot answer. I have no clue. But
what he did with the first team yesterday was hand off. That didn't make him a better quarterback, although it did make the offense dangerous.
And that's what I go back to, right? Excuse me. Sorry, I felt like I had to sneeze. But the reason I kept going back to, this idea that I was enamored with Trey Lance starting is, one, I just think in the modern NFL, given how the game is good for quarterbacks. I mean, Albert Breer posted this on Twitter a couple weeks ago, or not a couple weeks ago, less than a week ago. He said, since 2008, when Joe Flacco and Matt Ryan started, and both were widely successful as rookies and their teams were successful, only 2 quarterbacks have sat the entire year. One of them is Patrick Mahomes, who everybody points to, and because Patrick Mahomes sat, every quarterback who sits will be successful. You know who the other one is, Grant?
Who?
It's Jake Locker. And was Jake Locker successful? So only 2 guys have sat, right? And how many quarterbacks have gone in the first round? It feels like we get 3 or 4 every single season that go in the first round. So that's why, one, I was enamored with the idea of starting the rookie. And then the other aspect was, I just feel like, look, the inconsistencies, and I don't want to sound like I'm ripping on Jimmy, because I do think Jimmy's a solid starter and I do think he's a good player. But the inconsistencies I've seen with Lance over the last 3 games, especially the 2 I've watched on film in preseason, are things I've seen consistently with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
Indecision in the pocket, not knowing where to go with the ball when post-snap rotation changes takes away his first read. Sometimes looking a little frantic, sometimes, inconsistent ball placement. Objectively, he is more accurate at this point than Lance, but Lance also has the upside of making more big-time down-the-field throws that Garoppolo's arm, frankly, can't make. And so you have this trade-off and drop-off, and then you add the fact that this team is going to be a run-first football team. We're going to talk about the run game in a little bit, I think. But, you saw how special the run game looked. Raheem Mostert looked phenomenal. Trey Sermon looked phenomenal. Wayne Gallman has looked good in this preseason. Elijah Mitchell, JaMychal Hasty, they've all looked good. He called them 5 NFL caliber backs, and you cannot disagree with that statement They all look really good. The run blocking offensive line, Mike McGlinchey is a lead in run blocking. Trent Williams is the best in the NFL at what he does. Like, and Tomlinson's a good run blocker. Like, they're going to be able to run the football. So why not just rip the Band-Aid off and just play the guy who enhances the run game? Because frankly, when you look at this offensive line, when you look at these wide receivers, and when you look at this quarterback, no matter what, this team is going to struggle in the drop back pass game. No matter what. They're not built to do it.
And there's one more thing I want to say before we move on. You're right. He enhances the run game. That's enough. The other thing, turnover margin. It's simple, but it's the most important thing in football, and I think that's another thing that Trey Lance is going to improve with this team. Just that's all I want to say.
Yeah, and
turnover margin.
This team, really, the reality of this team is it has to be a run-the-ball, play defense football team. And if you're going to be a run-the-ball, play defense football team, you better win the turnover margin.
Right. And I would rather have a playmaker at quarterback than a mistake-prone, turnover-prone pocket passer. That's just me on that kind of team. Well, on any team.